I was challenged recently by a video that I watched by Jon Makes Beats. He was talking about how there's a need for more musicians to make and post music on YouTube. But more specifically, he talked about the need for musicians to talk about the process of how they've actually created a piece of music. And so I'm going to take up that challenge, and this is my first shot at it with the making of a song I posted recently. So, the creative process, where do you start with a song? In some ways, it can be quite random. You just have an idea and you go with it. And the idea doesn't even have to be anything spectacular. So I'm going to use an example of a song that at the moment sucks. It may still suck when I'm done, but I think it's a good example for the process and what you can do. I decided randomly that I hadn't pulled out a guitar in ages, and I would write a song based around an acoustic guitar. That was a mistake, and that's the beginning of why the song probably sucks, in that I haven't pulled out a guitar in ages. The guitar is my instrument, but it's also the thing that I have not played much in a long time. So I have no calluses left, and I guarantee that by the time I was done recording this, my fingers hurt pretty badly. So I decided, okay, I'm going to pull out a guitar, and I'm going to come up with a chord pattern. So I fired up the computer, I grabbed a couple of microphones and set everything up. And I just started fiddling and diddling. I thought, okay, I'll start with G. So G's a nice chord, Well, where do you go from there? Well, usually you go to C and then D. That's pretty standard and also incredibly boring. So I thought, well, one standard progression is to go to E minor and then C and D. But as I listened to that, I thought the C sounds a little bit too strong, so I dropped a note out of it. So instead of this, and then to the D, and so it was. That's fine. So I fiddled around with that, and usually when I do these things, I don't pay attention to what I'm doing. The next thing you knew, I was going, and then A minor 7th. I thought, hey, that's pretty, but it messes up if I do the full thing, each one. Then adding the D makes it, at least it sounded too long, so I decided to split the C chord with the A minor 7th. So we go down to the E minor, and I thought, okay, that's all right. Okay, well, that could be the verse or the chorus. In many ways it really didn't matter too much, but I decided that would be the verse. And then I thought, well, I need some kind of break. And I thought, well, since I threw in this A minor 7th, I might as well, go back and forth. That's a pretty standard kind of thing to do. And then to the D. And I thought, okay, that's kind of nice. Well, I think I could use another kind of break in there, so I went kind of a little bit longer than then I decided to do kind of a prolonged thing. And next thing you know, I'd constructed a song on the acoustic guitar. Now, this is where I made my next big mistake. I did not use a metronome, and I should have. I really should have. I did not want to wear headphones while I was recording to this, so I didn't have the metronome on the soundtrack, on the DAW. But I do have a little portable metronome and earbud, and I could have put it in, and I should have. But I thought, I think I can hang in there and keep this pretty steady, and I'll stomp my foot. But when I decided to lay in the drums, I realized there was nothing about this that was going to land if I just used standard drum track. It was not going to do it. So that led to the next challenge, and that was, how am I going to put in some drums? So let's talk drums. How in the world do you put a drum track in for a guitarist who can't play in time? Well, you have to do it manually. So here I have these turquoise tracks are my acoustic guitar tracks, and then the pink track here is the drums. I'm using Easy Drummer. I tried using the music one, you know, the one that creates the automatic music for you, but because it doesn't keep time, it doesn't work. So if we start this up, you can hear, and you'll be able to see that the kick here, it slowly drifts further and further away from where you want it to be. It ends up on the other side, and it just keeps drifting as we go. So literally what I did, if we stop this, is I literally just pounded out a kick, you know, and then I found a snare that I liked, that one, and I did the snare, just followed along as best I could, found a hi-hat that I liked, and I just found some cymbals that worked, you know, some toms, and literally just put it in where I could find it as best I could, and then I spent a long time rearranging each one of these little pieces to fit as best I could make it fit. And so that's how I ended up with a drum track that keeps in sync with the guitar, but it's not in sync with any time. And I tried tapping the tempo. It came out to 61 beats, but probably that's half time, so 122. But if you try playing, you know, with the metronome at 122, it does not sync up at all. But that's literally how I ended up with the drums. So I come from a fairly kind of traditional idea of how you lay out a song. So you got to have a rhythm part and drums and bass. So this is Bree. She's my bass, the only bass I ever made. And I don't have her plugged in at the moment because if you saw my wiring down here, you'd be absolutely horrified. And to plug her back in and to rewire everything is just too much of a hassle since then. But basically what I wanted to do was lay down a bass part that matched the guitar part and the drum part. And again, because everything's just kind of a little janky with lining up, it was a matter of going over it and over it and over it again. I should mention that when I do this, I really don't like to do overdubs or second takes, especially when I'm recording the video, because I just, you know, I want everything continuous. And since I'm not a bass player, and apparently not a great guitarist either, it can mean multiple takes. And also I tend to write the part as I do the takes. So the first few takes are me just basically discovering what it is that I'm trying to do and how the song is structured and where I should go where. So there could be a lot of takes. There could be easily half a dozen Takes with the acoustic guitar, I kept experimenting with how I wanted to structure the song, so there was probably, I don't know, about 7 or 8 takes for that until I got a structure that I liked and got through it with minimal amount of mistakes. So the bass part, there was probably half a dozen attempts with that, again because I had to figure out where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do with it, and I was writing it as I played, and I did not want to edit it. And I did have a version of the bass part which I liked, but it needed a couple of little tweaks, and I did edit it. Oh no, that sucks, I'm going to try it again, till I finally got a bass part that worked. Now the bass, I guess I haven't described too much here how I'm doing this stuff, but with the guitar I use 2 microphones, a small condenser microphone on the 12th fret and a large condenser mic further back to create some ambience. For it, I found that the small condenser was a little bit too bright for me, so it was a Lewitt 140 on the 12th fret and an Aston Spirit further back in cardioid pattern, just to give some warmth. I found when it was close, it was too boomy. It's not a dreadnought, my guitar. Zoe is kind of I guess you'd say a grand auditorium style, but she can be a little bit boomy. So I had that back to kind of give a nice balanced, warm, round tone with good definition to it. The bass I had plugged in to a Mackie passive direct box, into a Midas 502 preamp, and then into a DBX 510, which is a subharmonic synthesizer for bass, and then into a Midas 522, I believe it is, compressor, and then into the circuit. So everything was just kind of going along like that, and multiple takes with this. At this point, I've laid down the basic rhythm tracks, the acoustic guitar, the bass, and the drums. And now I want to start to listen to it. And part of my process is that I walk away from this for a while. I'll listen for a bit, I'll work on it, and then I'll walk away from it and come back with fresh ears. So at this point, I've come back with fresh ears, and I want to listen specifically to the acoustic guitar. After all, it is the fundamental instrument in this thing. It's where I started from, and I want to make sure it sounds good. Now I'm going to take off all the effects in the mix and just start playing the acoustic guitar. So here it is raw. I have the Lewitt mic panned slightly to the left and the Aston Spirit slightly to the right for a couple of reasons. One is I wanted to give it a little bit of spread, and secondly, there's some phase issues because the Aston was back from the Lewitt, and so I needed to start to work at minimizing any cancellation that's taking part between the Lewitt and the Aston Spirit. It sounds all right, but it really could use some work. And I'm just going to start it over again because at some point it fades out in the sound drive. We won't be able to hear anything. So of course, you have to add reverb. Every guitarist in the world needs reverb. So just a little bit, not a lot, just to give it a little bit there. A little bit of compression just to tighten it up a bit. And at this point I was a little worried about too loud, so I put in a limiter just to take it down. A little bit of EQ just to tighten it up so it didn't interfere with other instruments. And then finally, I have a spatial expander here, the TC1210, and I just love what it does. Listen to this. I'm going to start it over at the beginning. Here we go. Just hear how that opens it up. So this is with no effects at all. Hopefully you can hear this because I'm recording this on a camera and it's not the greatest way and it isn't a full mix yet, but here we go. Just how it opens up. It's kind of like a choir of angels. It sounds a little bit like a 12-string with the expander. So at this point, I've got the acoustic guitar about where I want it, and if I put the full mix back in again, take out this part here. This is what it's sounding like. So I got the acoustic guitar, got it where I want it to be. The drums are, you know, pretty much where I want them to be, and at least when you don't play in time. And the bass is fine in the mix. It's, you know, I'm not a great bass player. But as I listened to the acoustic guitar, I thought, it needs something more. There needs to be a little bit more in the rhythm section. So I decided to put in some keys, and I'm just going to solo them here for a moment. Here we go. It's not very loud, but I just wanted a little bit of keys. But when I put it into the mix, the problem I got here is it has a very sharp attack because everything's so sloppily kind of put together, and the keys are kind of foom, foom, foom. I didn't want to go through and try and adjust every note, so I decided to add a little bit of synth to it, just a little bit of a pad. So, and when it's in the full mix, the attack is there still, but it's, how do I say, deadened a little bit by the pad behind it. So it doesn't sound quite as out of sync with everything else. So at this point then, if we listen, I've got a rhythm section that I'm happy with. I've got the acoustic guitar, the drums, the bass, and now a little bit of piano and a pad. And it's time, of course, for screaming, well, not screaming electric guitar, but it's time for electric guitar because after all, I'm a guitar player and it needs something, needs lead to it. So that's the next part. So after getting the rhythm section basically what I wanted it to be with the acoustic guitar, drums, bass, and the keys, I wanted to put in some lead, and I wanted to do that on guitar. I debated whether guitar or synth, and I decided, no, I'm gonna, since this is supposed to be a guitar-paced video, I would use a guitar. I'm standing for this part of this because, well, after decades of being on church platforms standing to play, I can't play lead sitting down. It feels so uncomfortable, so that's what I do. Anyways, I had mentioned in an earlier clip that I don't want to edit or punch in or anything, that I want a clean solo, and the song's about 2.5 minutes long, and I discovered that it has been too long since I played, and I've run into a problem in that playing error-free for 2.5 minutes is tough for me now. I ended up doing 12 takes. Now part of that was that I was developing the solo, trying to figure out where I wanted to go with it, and part of it is just trying to figure out what in the world you know, is going on here, why I keep screwing up. So anyways, I ended up with some good clean takes, and I decided on number 8 out of the 12 that it was the best take for this, or at least it was the cleanest take. I had some nice parts and other ones that sounded really cool, but like I said, I wanted to have a guitar solo that was just one solid take from beginning to end with no adjustments made to it. So that's where I ended up with this. Now, I'm going to stop at that. I'm not going to add anything else to this. The next part, of course, obviously, is mixing this thing, listening to the other tracks, putting in some compression or EQ or whatever else needs to be done in order to make it sound the best that this thing is going to sound. And then, of course, after it's mixed and everything's adjusted in that, then it needs to be mastered. I'm not going to do that in this video. First of all, I'm going to let this thing sit for a day or two and come back to it and listen to it again and maybe totally redo the whole thing. I don't know. But I always, when I do these things, like to put time in between each part of it, just to give my head a chance to clear and for me to come with, I don't know, more objective voice. I don't know if it could be objective or not, but anyways, you know, we do what we can with it. So this video really is about the creative process of where do you start. In this case, I started saying, I'm going to do something based around an acoustic guitar. Picked one up, said, well, G, why not? And I played around and I finally figured out a chord progression, you know, G, E minor, some kind of variation on C, A minor seventh, and a D, which was also a slight variation difference on the D as well. And then I added some other chords because I wanted a little bit of structure, kind of like chorus, verse, and whatever, a bridge. Played around with that till I got something going. Liked what I heard, not necessarily what I played, but at least liked the idea of it. And then I added the other parts. I mean, it's probably, I don't know, a little too predictable that I stuck in bass and drums and a regular bass and regular drums. You know, maybe it might have been a little bit more interesting if I'd done maybe a synth bass, you know, like maybe Mini Moog or something a little edgier than that. Maybe with the drums, instead of going with a traditional kit, I should have maybe gone with an 808 or 909 or something like that. So there are decisions that I could have made that would have taken it in a very different direction, you know, even starting with the acoustic guitar and having it kind of disappear behind an electric rhythm guitar, or even a synth, you know, pad or chords progression. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go with these things, and that's what the creative process is about. You have to start somewhere with something, okay, and then build on it as you feel led. Somebody else would have taken this in an entirely different direction, like deleted the whole thing, done something entirely different. But at least you get an idea of the process and where we're going with this. So I hope you enjoyed this video. This is my first crack at doing this after watching Jon Makes Beats and Rhett Schell talking about people who are making music, maybe talking about the process they go through. I thought I'd take a crack at it. So we'll see how it goes. Thank you for watching this.